guys, welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. Today's video is actually featuring an Arc Hunter PvE build, which I know sounds a little bit bizarre considering that Arc has been left behind and is the only subclass not up to the 3.0 system, but that definitely doesn't mean that you can't still have some insane builds with it, and I'm bringing you one this season. Now I want to keep in mind that only a small part of this build actually functions with seasonal mods, so if you would want to save something like this for when Arc 3.0 does finally come out, and then just simply use this build and combine any new mods that might originate, it'll work pretty much just the same and should be just as deadly. Before we get into it, be sure to like and subscribe for more Destiny 2 content like this, and let me know what builds you want to see down below, as well as any recommendations for future content you'd like to see from this channel. Thank you in advance. Getting right into it, we are in top tree Arc Strider. This is the combination blow and deadly reach tree. And I'm using Gambler's Dodge just to better synergize with that tree overall, ensuring that anytime we use our melee, we get our dodge back. Anytime we use our dodge, we get our melee back. And then for our grenade, I'm personally using an Arc Bolt grenade. If you want to use Flux or Skip Grenade to fit your playstyle or just personal preference, you can go ahead and use either. Getting right into it, for our mods on our exotic for today is Assassin's Cowl. In short, Assassin's Cowl will provide you with health and shield regen along with a few seconds of invisibility each time you get a melee kill or a finisher, and finishers and final blows against more powerful combatants like champions or majors increase the amount of health and shield regen that you get, as well as the duration of the invisibility. Now I do want to point out that the health regen is basically negligible because regardless of what ad we're killing, even at minor ads, we're getting a majority of our health and shields back, so you can always rely on it to give you basically full health each time you get a melee kill or a finisher. The real difference is with invisibility. So by killing a minor ad, we get around 7 seconds of invisibility, and by killing a champion again with a melee or a finisher, we get around 15 seconds of invisibility. For those who don't know, in my opinion, invisibility is a top tier PvE intrinsic effect and one of the best things for endgame content. The ability to simply eliminate all aggression by all enemies to you is absolutely insane, and while there are some builds and intrinsic effects that can simply tank and regen damage, looking at your restoration times too, I would personally just rather go invisible and eliminate all aggression towards me. It cannot be understated how valuable invisibility is, and since we're triggering it from combination blow melees, it's incredibly simple and it's very easy to execute, enabling a playstyle that you can simply pop out, hit a very hard hitting melee that can potentially do over 100,000 damage in one punch, and then go invisible immediately after. And you can always benefit from finisher mods if you want to equip those as well. For the mods on the helmet though, I'm using Well of Tenacity. In short, picking up a Void Elemental Well reduces the damage we take from combatants for a short period of time. While this duration is pretty short, the effect is a 50% damage reduction, which is absolutely insane. The one bad side with this mod is that you often need to build into either increasing the duration of this effect or in simply the number of wells that'll spawn in order to supplement the lower duration but with more activation wells. With this build though, since we're using our dodge basically every single time we melee, we're always going to be having these wells spawn in whenever we get a weapon kill, meaning that we can reliably spawn these in basically anytime we get a weapon kill. I'm also rocking a Harmonic Siphon mod, meaning that rapid weapon final blows with an arc damage type will gen Orbs of Power. And then I'm also using a linear fusion rifle ammo finder just to benefit the heavy weapon I choose to use. If you want to use different mods, say like Dynamo and get increased super, another Harmonic Siphon mod, or just benefit your heavy or special weapon that you choose to use with ammo finder mods, you can totally do that as well. Next onto our gauntlets is Font of Might. In short, picking up an elemental well that matches our subclass type, in this case again Arc, gives us a 25% damage buff for 10 seconds, and this stacks on top of all other intrinsic buffs. And this is really good for stacking up damage with other intrinsic effects. As far as other mods go, you can really benefit whichever playstyle you want to actually use. For example, I'm using a linear fusion rifle loader just to benefit our heavy weapon again, as well as piercing sidearms for champion anti-barrier stuns. But really, you can build this out to whatever build you want to use, and since I'm going to be recommending multiple weapons to use in the first place, this is a great area that you can actually build out for more endgame focused content or better class synergy content based on the weapons you're using. Next up onto our chest piece is Reaping Wellmaker. Reaping Wellmaker is the primary mechanic by which we're spawning in these Void Elemental Wells in order to proc Well of Tenacity. Basically, every time we dodge and then get a weapon kill, that weapon kill will always generate a Void Elemental Well. And this enables a very reliable way to get Well of Tenacity active without having to buff a lot of its duration and spend a lot of our combat mod slots in just buffing the duration. Instead, we're just simply going to have a bunch of these available and able to pick them up whenever we need to. As far as other mods go, I highly recommend you use armor-based mods for whatever activity you're doing. For example, if there's a certain elemental burn, if there are certain enemy types like sniper enemy types that are very challenging in a certain activity for you, highly recommend you spec out in your resist mods for that. However, if you want to benefit a heavy weapon through reserves, you can totally do that as well. Next up onto our boots is Melee Wellmaker. Powered melee combat final blows will generate an arc elemental well for us. Now I do want to point out this won't proc every single time that we get a powered melee kill. It'll actually proc every other one. So basically every second melee final blow with combination blow tree active, it'll generate an arc elemental well. But again, with combination blow being extremely easy to use and having a very lengthy timer on its overall duration once the melee buff is actually going, and even with that every other melee kill requirement, it's very easy to spawn in wells with this. I'm also using Absolution just to reduce all of our ability cooldowns each time we pick up an orb of power. And then if you want to use a holster mod or a scavenger mod based on whatever weapons you're using, go for that too. And then finally onto our mark. Our first is Well of Ions. Whenever we pick up an Arc Elemental Well, our next powered Arc melee will deal 30% more damage. Normally something like this isn't actually too noticeable, but whenever you factor in that it stacks with every stack of Combination Blow, and it also stacks on top of something like 1-2 Punch, which is already a 3 times multiplier, this effect is incredibly noticeable and hits like a truck whenever combined with something like 1-2 Punch. And again, considering the fact that we're already using our Arc powered melee to gen in Arc Elemental Wells, meaning we basically pick it up every time that we get that melee kill, buffing then our Arc weapon damage and then our Arc melee damage every time we spawn one of those in. Every other hit of Combination Blow is going to be 30% stronger at base, and again we can stack on something like 1-2 Punch and hit for well over 100,000 damage in one go. And again, these melees also give us health regen, shield regen, and invisibility all the way up to potentially 15 seconds. Yeah, you can already see some of the synergy with this build and why it's one of my favorite in all of Arc builds in the entire game. Our next mod is the seasonal mod, Radiant Orbs. For those that don't know, you can use this on any subclass, not just Solar, and it'll make you radiant when you pick up an Orb of Power. This is why we're rocking the Harmonic Siphon mod in our helmet slot, so that we can gen these Orbs of Power, and Radiant does indeed stack with Font of Might, meaning that if you pick up an Orb of Power, you have Radiant on top of the 25% buff that Font of Might gives you to your arc weapons, meaning that your arc weapons now hit like a truck, and believe me, even your primary weapons that have arc affinities to them deal so much more damage with both these things active, it's not even funny. And we're going to be taking advantage for both of these effects to not only have a build where our melees are dealing increased damage, as well as having Void Utility in the background, but we're also going to be having insane arc weapon DPS across the board, and we have a lot of options to go over. So let's go over those now. First up, I'm going to recommend the Trespasser, which is this season's new exotic. Trespasser's intrinsic trait gives it a multi-shot burst after reloading after getting a kill, and this thing already hits like a truck with this burst, and when you have Font of Might and Radiant on top of it, it deals so much damage. This is one of my favorite ways, arc-wise, to just have insane amounts of ad clear, and even against majors and champions in lore and content, that burst, when combined with Radiant and Font of Might, is going to deal 30 to 50% of their damage. We can also deal over 100,000 damage in one go with our melee and 1-2 Punch if we wanted to, so there are plenty of ways supplementing this thing's rather low DPS but high ad clear in order to still make it viable in higher difficulty content. A few other weapons I would recommend, of course, in our kinetic slot is the Raglan D, which is actually a craftable shotgun where you can actually get a 1-2 Punch roll that benefits your playstyle. I don't have a crafted one that I'm really using for this build, as I just have a regular one with subsistence and 1-2 Punch. Again, nothing too serious, you just need 1-2 Punch at the kinetic slot. There are other shotguns that can also achieve this. This weapon is craftable though, so in my opinion, as long as you have the pattern unlocked, it is a much easier shotgun to get with 1-2 Punch at the kinetic slot than just randomly going for rolls. Another primary arc weapon I would recommend is Trinity Ghoul. Trinity Ghoul is already an insane ad clearing machine with its catalyst, and with Radiant and Font of Might active, it turns it up to a whole nother level. This is something that would directly compete with Trespasser for the primary arc exotic, and both are really good at ad clear, but mainly struggle with DPS, which is why I'm going to recommend the next few options. The next option is the fourth Horseman, and if you're anything like me, you haven't used this thing in well over a year, and it's because it's a very niche pick, and it kind of struggled to compete with other options. While its DPS is absolutely absurd, it really wasn't worth using due to its requirement to be as close to an enemy as possible, and whenever you're using this thing on an enemy, it's most likely a champion that's going to one-shot you as soon as you start getting close to it in endgame content. This build absolutely fixes this, and with Radiant and Font of Might active on a fourth Horseman, which has some of the highest DPS in the entire game, you don't even need mods for this thing. I'm not kidding, I was running around Legend and Master Law sectors without champion mods because I could just simply destroy champions with fourth Horseman, and it's just that easy. And with our invisibility almost always active, we can get to point blank range with champions and just unload on them with fourth Horseman, and again with Radiant and Font of Might active at all times. This thing is absolutely unfair in terms of DPS. And with the catalyst giving it an additional round in the magazine and increased reload speed, this thing hits even harder than it did before and is absolutely a pick I recommend if you're looking for just a delete button. Another weapon I want to recommend is Anarchy, which is a longtime favorite for basically any arc build and just any endgame build in general, as the ability to stick 2 Anarchy rounds on an enemy and just forget about them while having a lot of passive damage is really, really strong. Again, when you combine it with Font of Might and Radiant, like I've been saying with all arc weapons, it hits immensely harder. And the thing with Anarchy currently is that it's dealing 3 times its intended damage when you stick an enemy with 2 Anarchy nodes. So figure that you have 3 times the damage plus Radiant plus the 25% increase by Font of Might. Yeah, it's kind of stupid. And again, the ability to simply stick this on an enemy and then just walk away and have it still do damage is really, really strong. This is one I highly recommend as well. Again, while there's a lot of weapons I am recommending, it's simply because this build is so versatile. So please, if you're doing endgame content and you're trying to figure out which one works best, I highly recommend you rotate between all these ones I'm suggesting. These arc weapons are all fine on their own, but with the buffs that we're having and the utility through invis and health regen that we're getting, as well as the effectiveness of combination blow on minor adds, even in endgame content, it enables these weapons to hit like a truck, and it's absolutely insane how much damage they can pull off compared to what they already can do. The final weapon I'm going to recommend is Stormchaser, which is another heavy weapon. This actually drops from the duality dungeon. I don't have the best roll on it. Formal weapon is always a decent perk for heavy weapons. It can also roll with stuff like firing line, and just overall hits insanely hard. And again, with every arc weapon, Radiant and Font of Might is going to make it hit even harder. And it's a great weapon anytime you can reliably hit crits on a boss, especially a stationary one. While the recoil does take some getting used to, and the charge time is a little bit misleading, as you can actually start charging up your next shot while your current one is going off. After you have some mastery with it, it is one of the best DPS weapons in the game. It is also great for long-range targets. But that's going to be it for today, guys. Like I mentioned earlier, this build has not only insane melee-based DPS, which enables us to have melees well over 100,000 damage, but also gives us health regen and shield regen on melee kills and finishers. And those melee kills and finishers, based on the enemy that we kill, can give us anywhere from 7 to 15 seconds of invisibility, which is again one of the best intrinsic perks in all of PvE. And on top of that, we're having Radiant plus Font of Might buffing all of our arc weapons. You can already see where this is going. This is an incredibly versatile build. Again, while Arc 3.0 is not out, arc builds are still just as potent and deadly as they always have been, and this showcases exactly why. And again, like I mentioned earlier, this build only functions through one seasonal mod, so if Arc 3.0 does come out and you're looking for an arc build and want to dust this build off again, you can just basically bring this up with 0 changes and just implement any new changes you want to add in from Arc 3.0 when that launches, and you're pretty much set. But in the meantime, it's still stupid. And again, almost limitless invisibility combined with combination blows, 100,000 DPS punches, combined with Radiant Font of Might weapons and just insane health and shield regen. And yeah, we have a monster of a PvE build for hunters out there. So let me know what you guys thought of the build down below in the comments, as well as suggestions for future builds. Like I said, I'm always working on build guides going throughout the season, and let me know what content you'd like to see from the channel going forward as well. Thank you guys so much for the continued support on these builds. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Have a good one.